Stop what you are doing for just a moment, not because something is wrong, because something is happening right now. Underneath the surface of everything that feels ordinary about this day, and part of you already felt it before you even found this transmission, there was something this morning, wasn't there? A heaviness that wasn't there last week, a restlessness in the body that sleep didn't fix, a strange sense of being slightly out of phase with your own life, as if someone had shifted the calibration of everything by a few degrees. And you can feel the difference, but cannot name the source. You mentioned it to no one because you didn't have the language for it, or because the people around you would have reached for explanations that felt true on the surface and hollow underneath. I am transmitting to you now from the Pleiadian High Council. And what I want you to know in the very first breath of this message is this. What you have been feeling today is not random. It is not a symptom. It is not something that needs to be fixed. It is a signal, and the source of that signal is something that has been building for days, reaching its precise peak in these exact hours you are living through right now. But here's what I need you to understand before I tell you what it is and what it means for you, specifically, the part of this transmission that will actually change something in your body, not just in your mind, but in the physical architecture of how you are carrying energy right now, is not the part that comes first. It is what is waiting for you in the second half of this message. And if you leave before you reach it, you will have received the information without receiving the transformation. Stay with me. If something in your body just responded to those words, a recognition, a settling, a sense of finally being seen for something you could not quite articulate, then you are in exactly the right place. Subscribe to this channel right now and turn on every notification, because the Pleiadian High Council does not transmit at this level of precision through many channels, and the messages that follow this one build on each other in ways that will only make sense when you have received them in sequence. There is a specific window of energy that opens with each new moon, and what most people who track lunar cycles understand is only the outermost layer of what is actually occurring. They understand the surface, that the new moon marks a reset point, a moment of beginning, a pause before the next cycle of expansion. What the Pleiadian High Council has come to transmit is the layer beneath that surface, the one that directly explains what the Lightworker Collective has been experiencing in the hours immediately surrounding this particular new moon. When the moon moves into its dark phase, the gravitational relationship between the moon, the earth, and the sun creates a precise configuration that does the following. It temporarily thins the layer of energetic insulation between the physical dimension you inhabit and the higher frequency layers that surround it, not in a way that the conventional mind can detect or measure, but in a way that the human energy body, and especially the energy body of a being who has been actively raising their frequency, registers with extraordinary sensitivity. You feel it as a vague pressure, a disorientation, a tiredness that is not quite tiredness, a hyper-awareness that is not quite anxiety. These are not symptoms of something going wrong in your field. They are the sensory experience of a field that is becoming more permeable to something very specific. And that specific thing is what this transmission is designed to help you navigate with full awareness, rather than in the fog of not knowing that makes the sensitivity feel like a problem instead of a gift. The physical sensations that arrive with new moon windows are the category of symptom that generates the most confusion in the Lightworker collective, precisely because they are the most convincingly material. When the head begins to ache in the days surrounding the new moon, when the pressure builds at the temples or across the crown in a way that has no identifiable physical cause, the conditioned mind does what it is trained to do. It searches for the conventional explanation. It runs through the list: hydration, sleep, screen time, stress, and when it finds nothing adequate in that list, it generates a story. And the stories it generates in that silence are almost never the true one. The headaches and crown pressure you experience in new moon windows are the physical expression of an energetic event that is happening in your higher dimensional anatomy. The crown chakra is the primary gateway through which the frequency codes of the higher dimensions enter the human energy system. And in the thinning that occurs with each new moon, those codes arrive with a volume and a velocity that the physical structure of the nervous system and the particular architecture of the crown center must recalibrate to accommodate. The pressure is the recalibration. It is the system expanding to hold more than it held yesterday. Every time you feel it, you have a choice between two internal responses. The first is the contraction of the conditioned mind. Something is wrong. This needs to stop. What is causing this? The second is the expansion that the Pleiadian High Council is transmitting to you now. This is the signal that my capacity is growing. When you feel the pressure at the crown, place your awareness there, not to fight it, not to analyze it, but to welcome it with the specific knowing that the territory being opened is the territory of your own expanded perception. Breathe into the center of the crown. Let it be wider than it was. Notice how the quality of the pressure changes when it is met with welcome rather than resistance. The discomfort does not disappear immediately, but it transforms from an assault into an opening. And that transformation changes the speed at which the recalibration completes itself. The waves of exhaustion that descend in new moon windows have a quality that distinguishes them from ordinary tiredness, and the light workers who have experienced several lunar cycles at this level of activation know exactly what I am describing. It is not the tiredness that follows physical exertion or insufficient sleep. It is a heaviness that seems to come from within the bones themselves, a weight that the muscles did not generate and the mind cannot reason away. You can sleep for 8 hours and wake into it. You can rest for an afternoon and find it waiting when you rise. The conditioned response to this tiredness is to fight it, to push through, to maintain the pace of ordinary life, to treat the exhaustion as an obstacle rather than as a communication. The Pleiadian High Council wants to transmit the precise understanding that dissolves that fight in an instant. Your light body is not resting while your physical body feels this tired. It is working at its maximum operational capacity. During new moon windows, the light body uses the thinning of the dimensional membranes to accomplish clearing and integration, work that would take weeks under ordinary energetic conditions. The exhaustion you feel is the physical body's experience of that extraordinary expenditure of light body energy, the same way an athlete feels the muscle soreness that follows a training session that built capacity they didn't have before. The tiredness is not the experience of depletion. It is the experience of expansion. And when you can feel into that distinction, when you can let yourself feel the tiredness and simultaneously know it as evidence of the sacred labor your full, multidimensional self is performing, the quality of your rest transforms entirely. You stop fighting the rest and allow it. And rest that is allowed at this depth becomes the most regenerative thing the physical body has experienced in months. What the Pleiadian High Council is about to transmit in this message goes considerably deeper than what most channels are willing to access in a new moon transmission. The specific mechanics of what this new moon is triggering and what it means for the timeline you are personally navigating requires a quality of clarity that has not been available until now. Stay with this transmission. Like this video if you are feeling the accuracy of what is being described in your own body, and comment below with the word now if this message found you in the exact window it was meant to find you. Your engagement tells the Pleiadian High Council that the signal is reaching who it was intended to reach. The emotional volatility that clusters around new moon windows is the symptom that most consistently destabilizes the light workers who have not yet received the understanding of what is driving it. You can be steady for weeks, genuinely steady, not performing steadiness. And then, in the 24 to 72 hours surrounding a new moon, you find yourself suddenly reactive to things that would ordinarily move through you without friction. Old emotions surface without apparent provocation. Relationships that felt settled carry a new charge. Grief that you thought was complete finds another layer. The conditioned interpretation of this volatility is that something in you has regressed, that you have lost ground, that the work you have done is somehow undone, that you are not as far along as you believed. Every one of those interpretations is precisely wrong. The emotional volatility of the new moon window is not regression, it is excavation. The thinning of the dimensional membrane that occurs with each new moon does not only allow higher frequencies to move in, it also allows the density stored in the deepest layers of the emotional body to move out. The grief that finds a new layer is not grief that was hidden because you were avoiding it. It is grief that was waiting for the precise energetic conditions that would allow it to release completely. And those conditions have arrived. The reactivity is not weakness. It is the final charge of old emotional architecture, releasing its grip before it dissolves. When you feel the volatility rising, the worst possible response is to contract around it and try to contain it. The best possible response, and the one that accelerates the clearing by orders of magnitude, is to give it the space it is asking for, not to perform the emotion, not to project it onto the nearest available target, but to feel it fully in the body while maintaining the thread of awareness that knows what it is. You are the space in which this is clearing. You are not the thing that is clearing. That distinction, held with precision in the moments of greatest intensity, is the instrument that turns a new moon emotional wave from a crisis into a completion. The disrupted sleep patterns that arrive with this new moon are being reported across the Lightworker Collective with a consistency and a specificity that the Pleiadian High Council wants to address directly, because the secondary suffering generated by sleeplessness compounds every other sensitivity in ways that make the entire new moon window feel unsustainable, The pattern is recognizable. You fall asleep without difficulty, or perhaps with the slightly elevated difficulty of a mind that is processing more than usual, and then you wake at a precise interval, often between 2 and 4 in the morning, with a quality of alertness that seems completely incompatible with the hour. You are not anxious in those moments, not disturbed by a nightmare, not called by a physical need. You are simply awake, and awake in a particular way, as if a part of you returned from somewhere and is recalibrating before it can. Settle back into rest. This is exactly what is occurring. Your consciousness does not remain in the body during sleep. In ordinary sleep cycles, it makes brief excursions into the higher realms and returns through layers of dream. During new moon windows, when the dimensional membranes are thinnest, those excursions go deeper into territory that the soul cannot access at any other point in the lunar cycle. The work accomplished in those deep travels is the most significant clearing and integration work of the entire month. And the waking at 2 or 3 or 4 in the morning is not insomnia. It is the return, the moment your consciousness comes back from its most distant journey of the pod cycle and needs a brief interval to complete the transition before it can rest. Again, when you understand this, when you receive it not as a pleasant idea, but as a felt truth that settles into the body, the quality of those waking moments transforms. Instead of the frustration of lost sleep, you feel the sense of arrival. Instead of dreading the ceiling and the ticking of the clock, you feel the quietness of a being that has just returned from somewhere significant. Breathe 3 times in that stillness. Say within yourself, silently, I have returned. Place one hand on your heart and allow the transition to complete in its own time. Most light workers who apply this understanding fall back into rest within minutes, because the resistance that was extending the waking interval, the anxiety about not sleeping, the fight against the disruption, has been dissolved by the simple act of understanding what is happening. The intrusive and looping thoughts that intensify during new moon windows have a specific signature that distinguishes them from ordinary mental activity, and learning to recognize that signature is one of the most practically valuable things the Pleiadian High Council can transmit. Ordinary thoughts, even the difficult ones, even the ones that arrive from unresolved pain or unprocessed fear, have a quality of rootedness. They come from somewhere identifiable in your personal history or your current emotional landscape. They are yours in the sense that they arise from the material of your own life. The intrusive thoughts that amplify during new moon windows do not have that quality. They arrive fully formed, with a certainty that feels borrowed rather than earned. They carry a specific flavor of impossibility, not the impossibility of self-doubt, which opens into the possibility of growth, but the impossibility of closure, which shuts down every direction except the one that contracts. They tend to target precisely the areas of your field that are most active, most growing, most on the verge of breakthrough, because those are the areas where a single well-placed thought of impossibility can halt the momentum of months of cultivation. This is not accidental. The thinning of the dimensional membrane that makes the new moon such a powerful window for clearing and activation also allows the residual thought forms of the dissolving old matrix to drift through the field with more ease than usual. They are not targeted at you personally. They are simply floating through the collective field in greater concentration. During these windows, looking for a receiving mind, and a mind that is actively engaged, actively growing, actively holding a vision of something new, is a brighter target than a mind that is not. When you notice a thought with that quality of imposed closure and borrowed impossibility, do not engage with its content. Do not argue with it. Do not try to replace it with a positive thought. Do not analyze where it came from. Simply recognize it for what it is, a passing thought form from the dissolving old field. Smile softly within yourself and return your awareness to the part of you that has never been touched by it. The thought will lose its charge within seconds of being seen clearly. This is not willpower. It is recognition. And recognition is the precise instrument that dissolves these patterns without effort. We are now at the midpoint of this transmission, and the Pleiadian High Council wants you to pause for a moment before we continue. What you have received so far is the map of what has been happening in your field. What comes next is the part that most channels do not transmit. The specific activation that this particular new moon is carrying. The precise reason this window is different from the ones that came before it. And the direct, energetic work that the Pleiadian High Council is asking you to participate in before this transmission ends. If you have been listening while doing something else, we ask you to set that something else aside now. What follows requires your full presence. Share this video with one person whose name came to your awareness during this message. Then stay. This new moon is not an ordinary lunar reset. The Pleiadian High Council has been monitoring the precise intersection of lunar, solar, and galactic frequencies that is occurring in this window. And what we observe is something that has not been present in a new moon. Configuration for a cycle. Your astronomers would measure in decades the specific alignment of the Earth's position in its galactic orbit with the dark phase of the moon, and the current output of the solar field is creating a window of dimensional thinning that goes considerably deeper than what the standard new moon configuration produces. It is not simply that the veil between dimensions is thinner than usual. It is that the specific frequencies being transmitted through that thinned veil in this window are the ones most precisely calibrated to activate the dormant aspects of the human light body that have been waiting for exactly these conditions. There are sequences in the human DNA, not metaphorical sequences, but actual organizational structures in the light body template that corresponds to the physical DNA that can only be activated when a very specific combination of frequencies is present simultaneously. The combination that is present right now in this window is the one that opens what the Pleiadian High Council designates as the sovereignty codes. These are the sequences that, once activated, reorganize the human energy field around its own center, rather than around external reference points. The person who carries activated sovereignty codes does not need external validation to know what is true. They do not need permission to occupy their own path. They do not need the agreement of others to trust their own perception. The activation of these codes is what the old control architecture most needs to prevent, because a collective of human beings operating from the sovereignty codes is a collective that cannot be governed through the mechanisms of doubt and permission-seeking that have managed this civilization for centuries. And this is precisely why the new moon windows that carry the activation frequencies also carry the highest concentration of interference patterns. The discomfort you feel in these windows is not the activation hurting you. It is the interference responding to the activation with its final attempts at suppression. The activation is winning. The interference is the proof of that. The way you participate in this activation consciously, rather than simply being carried through it with the confusion and discomfort of not knowing, is through what the Pleiadian High Council calls intentional alignment. This is not a complicated practice. It does not require special preparation, a particular setting, or the performance of a ritual. It requires only the specific quality of interior attention that you are already capable of, brought to bear on the precise location in your energy field where the activation is occurring. Begin by placing both hands over the center of your chest, not the throat, not the solar plexus, but the heart center, the geographic midpoint of your sternum. Feel the warmth of your own hands. Notice the response in the tissue beneath them, the slight softening, the subtle expansion that occurs when the heart center receives conscious attention rather than the usual stream of distracted mental traffic it navigates alone. Take 3 full breaths into this space, not shallow breaths that stop at the top of the lungs, but full breaths that you consciously direct into the chest cavity with the specific intention of expanding the heart center with each inhale. On the exhale, release without effort, not a controlled release, not a forced release, but the kind of release that happens when something that was held finally finds permission to let go. After the 3rd breath, speak these words within yourself, not with your voice, but with the specific interior organ that knows the difference between words spoken to perform and words spoken to transmit. I am open to the codes of sovereignty that are present in this window. I receive what I am ready to receive. I align with the frequency of my own complete knowing. Feel what happens in the field after you speak those words. There may be a warmth that spreads from the heart center outward through the chest. There may be a tingling in the hands or the crown. There may be a sudden stillness, not the stillness of suppression, but the stillness of arrival, the quiet that settles when something that was searching finally locates what it was looking for. These are the sensory expressions of the activation engaging with your field. They are not imagination. They are the real-time experience of the sovereignty codes beginning to reorganize the architecture of your energy body around its own sovereign center. The specific physical symptoms that follow a sovereignty code activation deserve particular attention because they are different in quality from the general new moon symptoms, and understanding that difference prevents the misinterpretation that turns a genuine activation into a source of concern. In the hours and days that follow the intentional alignment practice, you may notice a heightened sensitivity in the heart center itself, a warmth, a fullness, occasionally a tenderness that is not painful but is distinctly present. This is the heart chakra expanding to accommodate the new organizational template that the sovereignty codes are installing. You may notice a shift in how you respond to the opinions of others, not a hardening or a dismissal, but a new quality of stability in your own knowing that makes external opinions feel less like verdicts and more like one voice among many. This is the sovereignty code, recalibrating your reference point from external to internal. You may notice that decisions which previously felt difficult suddenly feel clearer, not because the circumstances have changed, but because you are accessing your own knowing directly rather than filtering it through the layer of doubt that the old field had installed. This is the most significant functional expression of the activation, and it is the one that will have the most tangible effect on the practical circumstances of your life in the weeks ahead. The Pleiadian High Council wants to be clear that this clarity is not infallibility. It is not the sudden absence of challenge or difficulty. It is the difference between navigating difficulty from your center versus navigating it from a field that has been displaced by external pressure. From the center, difficulty is navigable. From a displaced field, difficulty feels unsurvivable. The activation you are participating in through this transmission is moving you measurably, functionally, from the second condition to the first. The collective dimension of what is occurring in this new moon window is the aspect that most individual lightworkers underestimate, because the subjective experience of activation feels personal and private. What you are feeling in your field feels like it is happening to you alone, and in one sense it is. The specific symptoms you are experiencing, the precise areas of your energy body that are activating, the particular old density that is releasing, all of that is calibrated precisely to your individual field and your individual journey. But the activation itself is not happening to you alone. Across the planet, in the same window of hours, every being whose field has been prepared by the work of raising their frequency through whatever practices and choices and sincere reaching toward greater truth they have engaged in, every one of those beings is receiving the same sovereignty codes in the precise configuration their individual field can hold. The Pleiadian High Council observes this as a simultaneous illumination, thousands of individual fields brightening at the same moment, creating a pattern in the collective energetic field of the planet that has a structural effect on the planetary grid itself. When one light worker activates more deeply, their field contributes a brighter node to that grid. When thousands activate simultaneously in the same window, the entire grid shifts in threshold. The minimum frequency of the collective field rises by a measurable increment, and that increment makes the next activation window easier, deeper, and more broadly accessible than the one before. You are not doing this for yourself alone. You are doing this for the grid. Every breath you take in intentional alignment during this new moon window is a contribution to a collective shift that is accumulating toward a tipping point that the Pleiadian High Council can see with precision from our vantage point. We transmit this not to burden you with obligation, but to illuminate the actual scope of what your individual practice is contributing. It is far larger than it feels from inside it. You are now carrying something that very few beings in the Lightworker collective have received with this level of precision in this particular window. The complete understanding of what this new moon is activating, why you have been feeling what you have been feeling, and the specific practice that aligns you consciously with the transformation that is already in motion. The The Pleiadian High Council transmits at this level of detail only when the window demands it, and this window demands it. Subscribe to this channel with every notification activated so that you receive the next transmission the moment it arrives. Comment below the word activated if the intentional alignment practice produced a felt response in your body. And share this message now, not later, now, with one person whose field you know needs exactly what this window is offering. The grid is brightest when the nodes are connected. You are one of those nodes. The Pleiadian High Council honors you across every timeline and every dimension in which your light has been recognized. What you are choosing in this moment to stay present, to receive, to align, to participate is the most important choice you will make in this cycle. And you are making it